Let's dive into tomorrow. Roster cuts come. The Steelers will cut 37 guys. They've already started to waive some people, and they'll continue to over the next 24 hours, and then a large chunk of that will come right at the end of their deadline. The mix of the next 24 hours will be a lot of guys that they just brought in that they're already past. They know they're not making the roster. They're going to get rid of them early because they're going to practice the next 2 days, and they're going to really hone in on the guys that are right on the verge of this roster cut. That's what they do Monday and Tuesdays. They take every second they possibly can to see if guys like Darius Rush and Beanie Bishop and Ryan Watts can make a final statement to say, hey, I deserve to be on this roster. Logan Lee's another one, rookie Logan Lee. They'll do a lot of cuts where it comes to guys that don't mean anything, and then a lot of cuts for guys that they understand came close, but they are sure aren't going to make this roster, to give them another opportunity and maybe a better shot to land somewhere early. That way their name doesn't just get caught in the mix and lost in the wave. Zach Gentry is a good example from a year ago where the Steelers cut him kind of early. That way they can move on from him. Cody White's another one. Guys that they think will fit in elsewhere, will find a place elsewhere, and they can give them a head start, essentially, in free agency. I have 3 surprise roster moves that I think the Steelers will make tomorrow. And I think all 3 of them are a bit, to their own degree, I guess, surprising, but stuff that I didn't see coming. If you asked me a week ago, 2 weeks ago, where we stand now, I'm feeling pretty confident in it. The first one is I think Scotty Miller makes this team. I think Scotty Miller has climbed his way into the 53-man roster. I think that the Steelers, unless a guy that is very shocking becomes available, the Steelers will keep Scotty Miller and they will rock with the wide receivers that they have. And that is George Pickens, Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson. And if Roman Wilson starts his year on IR, Dez Fitzpatrick is the next guy. That's in my head. That's where we stand. And then Scotty Miller / Dez Fitzpatrick. I think Dez has done a lot to earn a place on this team, but Scotty has return ability. He has been more consistent throughout training camp and throughout the preseason. And while Dez has made some really nice plays and done some really nice things, he struggled early in training camp, like really struggled. And I think that's going to hold him back to the point where the Steelers are going to look at it and say, Dez has looked good, but he wasn't as consistent as we wanted him to be. Meanwhile, Scotty has been as consistent as we wanted him to be. Scotty is my first name, I think, surprise to make this roster. And I honestly wouldn't be shocked if the Steelers walk in there and don't add another wide receiver and stick with Scotty Miller instead.
Yeah, rings talk, and specifically one ring talks, and that's Scotty Miller's Super Bowl ring. And Mike Tomlin values that a lot. And I think going into this season, I liked Dez Fitzpatrick after the first preseason game. I said that if there was going to be a surprise player to make the roster, I know I threw out Dez Fitzpatrick because he's a preseason superhero typically every single time. And he was that again this year. And honestly, I could see him making the roster, and you could see him making the roster too if Roman Wilson ends up landing on IR. I'm hoping it doesn't, but I think he made a good case for himself. But again, Scotty Miller is that versatile piece that can play in, like you mentioned, different scenarios, including return. And I'll always say it, for Mike Tomlin, rings talk, and Scotty Miller has one, and he did it with Tom Brady. So that experience is going to also help get him a little bit of an advantage too.
Yeah, I agree. Familiar with Arthur Smith's offense is another slot option. Speedy has all the special teams ability you want him to have. It all matches up. I think the Steelers will go with Scotty, like you said, and like I said, Dez if Roman Wilson, starts on injured reserve. Next, speaking of Beanie, I think Beanie gets cut. I think Beanie Bishop is gone, and the Steelers keep Ryan Watts instead. The guy has, this summer, Beanie Bishop won himself a starting job and then lost himself a roster spot. And in the words of Mike Tomlin, preseason games mean more than training camp. Games mean more than practice. And, well, Beanie Bishop was the worst of the worst in the games and the best of the best in practice, but it's not going to be enough to get him on the 53-man roster. The Steelers, in my opinion, and if I had to guess, in my prediction, they keep Thomas Graham. He is their starting nickelback to start the season. I would not be surprised if they signed a corner, but I'm not confident that they're going to just yet. There hasn't been any word. There hasn't even been any rumbles. Like, I haven't heard anything about the Steelers shopping for a corner, and therefore I have a hard time sitting here saying they're going to go shopping for a corner. That could change, and a lot will happen in 24 hours, but this is just what I've heard so far. I don't think Beanie makes it. I think the Steelers keep Thomas Graham. He'll be fine for the time being until Cam Sutton comes back. I thought Thomas Graham played very well in the preseason and in training camp. I think he's been a sleeper, a guy that Beanie Bishop has stolen the show. Thomas Graham has looked very consistent and impressive throughout the entire summer. Ryan Watts you're keeping because he's another avatar safety. He's a big dude. He could fit the Joey Porter, Corey Trice dynamic that you're looking for. You drafted him, which means that you immediately put more stock in him than you did Beanie Bishop. And I think just consistency is key. And he hasn't looked the greatest, but he's looked consistent. He's made plays on special teams. He's done things as a gunner, which stands out way more than anything you're going to do on defense. And the Steelers are going to want another reliable name at safety just in case somebody goes down and they have to make a move, because Miles Killebrew doesn't play safety. He doesn't play defense. So you're going to need somebody else. I have Thomas Graham and Ryan Watts over Beanie Bishop. It's a tough one. I think you could get Beanie on the practice squad, but I just don't think he's done enough to earn himself a roster spot.
Yeah, Beanie Bishop's a name that we were talking about directly after they signed him as a UDFA, and everybody was saying, well, I mean, there's an availability and a possibility here that he could be a week 1 starter. So there were already pretty high expectations for a guy that wasn't taken in 7 rounds of the NFL draft. A rookie, undrafted free agent coming in as a starter is a tall task for anybody. He started slow in summer practices, didn't have the greatest, OTAs, didn't have the greatest mini camp. And then, of course, he comes in and hits the ground running in training camp. So it's unfortunate that he wasn't able to, I think, especially get that second week against Buffalo. I think if he was able to get that, it might have gone a long way in giving him an opportunity to build and be in a position to really hammer home that he should be the starter this previous Saturday against Detroit. But when you miss a week like that, especially whenever you're coming from behind the 8 ball, being a rookie, being undrafted, being, even though in the backyard and the Steelers having a lot of familiarity with him, being a guy who had to earn every single opportunity he's given, it wasn't enough time. I wish he would have been able to stay healthy, and we could have seen where he would be this week if he would have had another healthy week of training and another opportunity against the Bills in week 2.
Yeah, I agree. I think if he plays that other game, it's a lot different and things change. But the best ability is availability. He didn't have it. That happens all the time. I also think that it comes down to the practice squad decision, and I think Beanie Bishop can make his way onto the practice squad a little bit easier than a guy like Ryan Watts could. Thomas Graham, you could sneak him on easy, but I just think Thomas Graham, you're going to need somebody on the 53 that you can trust at that nickelback spot. Thomas Graham's going to be the one. So it's a tough call. I get it. The hype for Beanie Bishop was real. It just doesn't always work out. The Steelers aren't going to keep somebody over a name not as small as Beanie Bishop. And then my last one, we've talked a lot about the wide receiver and adding a wide receiver, adding a corner. The Steelers are going to go out and make this move. They're going to make that move. Where we stand today, and I've already said this, the Steelers are going to go add an offensive tackle by the time these 53-man roster cuts are over. I don't know who that's going to be, but he's going to come and they're going to add him, and he's going to be a swing tackle. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's a bigger name than we expect. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a DJ Humphrey or a Donovan Smith who's just coming in here to be a swing guy and see what he can do, just looking for a job. Just a guy looking for a job. But the Steelers will go out and they will add somebody. I'm sure there will be a name or two available that get cut this week. That's my signing. I remove myself from wide receiver. I remove myself from corner. I feel very confident that the Steelers are going to add an offensive lineman simply because they need to. You just can't go in there with the lack of depth that they have. And I get it. It's not ideal. You wanted Dylan Cook to be that guy. You wanted Troy Fautanu to start and Dan Moore to be that guy. Didn't work out. Injuries happen. I think you go out and you sign somebody. My one signing that the Steelers will make tomorrow is an offensive tackle.
Yeah, it's a move kind of built out of necessity. And it's unfortunate, like you mentioned, because you don't really have a true swing tackle, even if you go with the two young guys in there. If Fautanu is ready, which he might not be, we don't know but at this point. If Broderick Jones bounces over to the left, then you have a backup swing tackle in Dan Moore, who's not really that comfortable in being a swing tackle. He's a backup left tackle that struggles whenever he moves over to the right, or at the very least has struggled throughout his career when he moves over to the right. And then you lose Dylan Cook, somebody who could bounce between both sides. Again, it's unfortunate because they would like to probably spend their resources on something else, but This is out of necessity now. You need to, especially, and I can hammer this home all episode long, especially with the offense that you're planning on running. You need to be strong and you need to be deep up front. They're going to need another body and they're going to need somebody else that can switch to both sides better than I think a Dan Moore can.
Yes. And even if it's just for right now, even if I think you could keep Dan Moore, Troy, and another offensive tackle. And I think you'd feel, because I think you were going to keep Dylan Cook no matter what. And with Nate Herbig missing time or going on IR, that roster spot's open. I agree with you. I think it happens. That's my only addition that I see coming. I know that they're going to go shopping. They're going to do their window shopping and see who's available, make some phone calls. The only one that I'm really locked in on is an offensive tackle. I don't have a name for you, but I do expect it to happen. Those are my big 3 surprise roster cuts or roster moves that are coming tomorrow. We have a ton going on. This will not end. It is going to be as chaotic as humanly possible over the next 24 hours. It's a great time. For those of you who have not been keeping up with the schedule updates, tomorrow we're actually going to go 4:30 because the roster cuts happen at 4. You'll start to hear moves. Maybe there's some trades right after that. That gives us enough time to jump on here, have the roster cuts that have happened, have your 53-man available for you, and answer all the questions that you guys have.